Hello and welcome back to the Final Lap podcast. This is Josh. I'm joined, as always, by Sam. We have plenty to get to for you guys today. First up, though, Sam, how are you doing, and how was your weekend? How did you enjoy the races here?
I'm doing all right. I had a great time watching these races because we got to see two of the modern greats really dominate these races, Kyle Larson and Alex Palou. What an awesome weekend to watch those two guys kind of cruise to victories and see some great action further back in the pack, too.
Yeah, it was definitely some great races out there this weekend and some really dominant performances. First off, though, we will start in Indianapolis, the beginning of the month of May, where Alex Palou wins at the Indy Road Course, the Indy GP layout, for his fourth win in the first five races of 2025. He has an average finish of 1.2 to start the season. In the first five races here, probably the best start in IndyCar history. You might be able to compare that to some other historically great starts, but this one certainly has to be up there as one of, if not the greatest start that we've had so far, and kind of getting in some rare air here with Alex Palou so far this season, just with what he's been able to do. Winning four of these first five has been nothing short of incredible.
Yeah, he's really been phenomenal all season long so far. Just taking a task to these guys. I mean, it's one of the most dominant performances we've seen, in any series since we started following racing all those years ago. I mean, like you mentioned, 4 wins in 5 races and another podium finish. You can't do much better than that. The guy's just been unbelievable the way he's really dominated not only his teammates, including a multi-time champion, a seven-time champion Scott Dixon, but also all these other fantastic drivers throughout the IndyCar field. He has been by far the best so far this season.
Yeah, it's kind of getting to a point now where you have to start kind of comparing his performances here in IndyCar to other areas of the motorsports world, just with what we've seen. And the biggest one that sticks out to me, I think, is Palou in 2025 versus Verstappen in 2023 in F1. If we just compare them, by the stats here, I know we've only just started this IndyCar season. There's still 12 races to go, but Palou in 2025, 4 wins in 5 races, an average finish of 1.2, 2 pole positions, holds a 97-point lead in the championship. His average margin of victory has been 8.64 seconds. And, the biggest differentiator from IndyCar to F1 is he's done this in essentially equal machinery to the rest of the field. Different manufacturers. Some teams have a little bit more speed in what they're able to do, from a performance side and with the analysts that they have on their team and all that. But it's pretty much equal machinery here in IndyCar. And then we compare that to Verstappen in 2023, 19 wins in 22 races, 10 straight wins, 12 pole positions, an average finish of 1.27, 290-point championship margin in the end over his teammate Sergio Perez. And that was done in the best car on the grid, not quite to the standard. They're not at that standard anymore, obviously. And, I'd say Max still largely carried the role there even in 2023, but that car was, certainly the best car on the grid. And Max was able to take that, to some really great places in 2023. And I think, it is early on. Obviously, there's a lot of the season left to go for Palou, but it's one that I think is worth, starting to compare at least, just given what we've seen from Palou in 2025. It's been truly amazing stuff from him.
Yeah, it has. I mean, I would still lean Max just because of his consistency throughout the season if you're going to compare the two. But Palou could absolutely get to that point. We've got a lot of racing to go, and especially if Palou can get to that point over the course of a lot more ovals coming up this season, which we know he's still very good at, but are not his strong suit compared to the road and street courses. I think if he can keep this pace on another style of track and one that's very different, I think then is really worth having the conversation, especially like you mentioned with a lot closer to equal machinery. I think you can make a great argument that Pelosi is one of the best modern motorsport seasons we've ever seen. So a lot of racing to go, but if it gets to that point, yeah, he's certainly on track for one of the all-time great seasons.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. We're very early on in this Palou season, and what Max did over the course of 2023 is, it was amazing. 19 wins in 22 races, 10 straight wins, so many accomplishments, so many podium finishes, so many wins, obviously. And then, to me, it's like because he had the best car on the grid. What does Palou have to do in fairly equal machinery over here in IndyCar to kind of match that if this continues for the rest of the season? Obviously, the ovals are where he'll probably struggle the most. He'll still probably have some good finishes there, maybe even pick off his first oval win, but it's not his strong suit, I would say. Is 12 out of 17 races the number that would take Palou to that next level? Is it 13, 14? What's kind of the comparative number of wins that it takes for Palou to equal or at least, put up a solid fight with what Max did in 2023? To me, I think it's got to be probably 13 wins. I think 13 out of 17, 12 or 13 is a really solid number. If he gets to that number of wins in IndyCar this year in, equal machinery, with, road courses, street courses, and ovals, I don't think that there's any way that you can sit back and say that Palou didn't have at least equal the season that Verstappen had in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what it all comes down to is can Alex Palou keep up this pace on the ovals? I think that he's certainly a very good oval racer, but it tends to be his weakness since he's entered IndyCar. I think if he can keep up this pace on the ovals, I think that he could be in for one of the all-time seasons that we've ever seen in IndyCar. I mean, even an 8 or 9 win season would be extremely impressive. I believe 10 is the record.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. I mean, if he managed to get 12 or 13 wins in IndyCar with similar, essentially equal machinery, it would be up there with one of the best all-time motorsport seasons in any league or series out there. I mean, F1, NASCAR, IndyCar, WEC, IMSA, whatever. It would be up there certainly. And just the fact that just how much better he is. I mean, when he gets out front that that's kind of it. You're kind of toast, and that if he starts on pole, I mean, like the RLL guys and especially Ray Hall, they had a chance there. They managed to get ahead, but that was due to them starting the race on better tires and then ending it on much worse tires. And obviously, we saw how that strategy panned out, and kind of getting to that next phase of going to the actual race here on Saturday. There was a new tire allotment this weekend. You had to use 2 hards and 2 softs at any point in the race. They could be new, they could be scuffed. And RLL there, opted for the soft strategy to start, the ending on 2 sets of hards, whereas Palou and the others, opted to go soft hard or hard soft, and kind of split that strategy up to where they were able to use the hards earlier on and not have to utilize them in the last stint or two. And it's just kind of like what RLL there was thinking with that tire strategy. I mean, I think they probably deep down felt like they had to do something different from Palou to beat him. But I just don't think that was the way to go about it and the way to do it, because we saw what Palou did at Thermal. When he got on better tires at the end, he was able to just run away with it. I mean, I think it would have been better to start on worse tires and finish on the best tires possible to give yourself the best chance there. Against Palou, I guess they wanted to have a chance to keep him in dirty air for part of the race and keep him behind, but I don't see you beating Palou that way. If you give Palou a fresh set of softs at the end and you're on any kind of tire deficit, I don't see any way that works out for you. In a good way. So I didn't like what RLL was doing with that strategy. I did like the new tire allotment rule. I think that helps, some good strategy for the race overall, just in terms of what we were watching entertainment wise. But the way RLL went about that, I did not agree with it, and I thought it was, not the right way to try and beat Palou. I guess they thought they had to try something, but that I don't think that was it, and it didn't seem like anybody else really kind of thought that was the best strategy to go about it either.
Yeah, I mean, we see that all the time. Teams and drivers with less pace maybe try something a little bit desperate, a little bit outside the lines to go for a race win. And I totally get it. If you're a Ray Hall, haven't won a race in a long time and got to really get aggressive, got to push the tempo and give it your best shot. So, even if it wasn't, maybe the most efficient, maybe they finish this race a little bit higher with a different strategy. I think, if they thought that was their only path to a potential win, I think you got to go for it. So, even though it might not have been a perfect strategy, I don't blame them for trying it and trying something different. Like you said, it's going to be really tough to hold off Polo in that scenario. Certainly not something that they maybe thought was likely, but you never know what could happen in these races. And yeah, so I think I agree with you that I like the new soft hard allotment. I think that can really spice things up, especially with the way that they were running, only about 20 to 25 laps on each set of tires. That really ended up working out just about perfectly for about four stints each. So
Hmm.
well done to IndyCar there with the tires and the pit windows and getting that pretty much perfectly right in my opinion. But yeah, I don't blame Ray Hall for trying something a little bit different, even if it maybe wasn't the most efficient strategy there.
Yeah, I agree, and I guess I don't blame them in the end for trying something different. It just, to me, from the get go, it just didn't seem like that was going to be the right play to get it done. Yeah, I think in their position, and yeah, I would probably feel similarly that you have to try something different to Pelot to hopefully beat him, but also. Um, just with what they were doing there, I mean, it was like, I don't know if Ray Hall uh, would have been able to do what he needed to do, um, just with those tires and everything at the end. I just think it was going to be really hard for him to make that work. And yeah, it was a tough ending for Ray Hall because I think it was such a good day for them, just in general. But I think they could have also had a lot better if they just stuck to that same strategy, and they might have got a second or a third. But I guess that they were trying to go all out for a win, which I do respect that. From their perspective. And that kind of goes to the rest of with RLL. Is It's crazy how they're able to show up just really at just the NDGP race every year and be one of the top performers, be up there competing for podiums, for wins, and then you go to pretty much any other track on the schedule and they are really struggling, kind of just a midfield to farther back even team at the majority of these races, unless they get lucky every once in a while. But here it's like they found the code or something that makes their machines work here. And it's a shame that doesn't translate to some of these other tracks, because Ray Hall, the name Ray Hall is so synonymous with the sport, and I think that team could have a lot of great success if they were able to translate this, to at least maybe two or three other tracks on the schedule. But it's really this and that's it. It's really odd that that's how their whole season kind of revolves around this one race in a way.
Yeah, I think I'm not the most technically qualified to answer this, compared to an engineer or something, but I will say that the NDGP layout's a very unique track. It's not even just in IndyCar terms and in motorsport in general. You don't get a lot of tracks like, I mean, you get like the Rovals in NASCAR, but it's a little bit different with stock cars than it is with the open wheels. You don't get a lot of open wheel racing like this where you're sort of half on an oval, half on a road course almost. And, I think just being such a unique track can lead to some different results, some interesting results. We saw not just Ray Hall himself. We saw a couple other guys up there in that top 10 or so, both in qualifying and in the race that you don't normally see. So I think that this is just such a unique track that occasionally you're going to get some crazy results. And I think that, it's certainly worth having it on the calendar for that reason. I think it is a great test of racing because it tests sort of different disciplines. And uh, yeah, I mean, it just having another race in Indianapolis makes sense for the series, and that track is really fantastic now that they've, obviously it's been a long time since the F1 tire debacle there. Now that everything's gotten figured out on that front, I think this is a fantastic track and one that's absolutely worth having on the calendar for some unique moments like this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That track is so unique to what we see on the rest of the IndyCar calendar that I guess they come back with that same setup every year since this generation of car has been around so long, and they're able to just make it work with slight tweaks here and there to make it a little bit better every year. It's just a shame that they haven't found a way to translate that to anywhere else that's even kind of remotely close to what we see at Indy GP. In their defense, I don't think there is anywhere really on the rest of the calendar that's like the Indy GP, just because a lot of their road courses are in areas that have a lot of elevation change. There's pretty much none of that at Indy. And then the places that don't have a ton of elevation change are street courses, and that's a whole different animal in itself. So I think it's just a weird combination of track layout, probably comfortability with their drivers, and honestly, just they found a formula that works and they've just stuck to it. Like I said, I'd like to see that translate to maybe some other places, but just for their sake, just so that they could maybe find some better results throughout the year. But yeah, it is. I think it does speak to just the uniqueness of the track that teams are able to show up here and compete. Really just here and nowhere else the rest of the season.
Yeah, it really just is, something special about it. I think it's in an interesting spot on the calendar too. Of course, you have already done some Indy 500 practice, and the next 2 weeks will all be build up to that race. So maybe kind of, I don't want to say catch some teams sleeping because every race matters in IndyCar. There's not that many of them, and every points chance counts. But having the big one 2 weeks away and already being there on site, I think it's a good chance for some teams, if they maybe put more resources towards the first race, to kind of capitalize, especially if the car suits the track there.
Yeah, and yet RLL has been so bad as a team these last few years that the actual Indy 500, it's you're right, maybe one of those things where they're putting a lot more focus on that GP race than they are on the 500, which is probably counter to what the rest of the field is really doing. So that probably is a good factor in it as well. If that's the route that they're taking, which to me, I would still put a lot of my focus on the 500, but I guess I think they have a few weeks to get that figured out here after the GP race. So yeah, I think that's a really good point there. Let's move to our personal podiums now for the Indy Grand Prix. I have Alex Palou number one. I don't think there's any other person you could put at number one, and he may be number one on a lot of personal podiums for a while in IndyCar here. Second, I had Pato O'Ward moved up from 8th to 2nd. Had probably the best pace other than maybe Ray Hall and O'Ward, and Palou, sorry, the entire day. I think Ray Hall really up until that last stint was still hanging on pace even on his first stint on those hard tires. And then it all kind of just came apart for him there at the end. But other than those two guys, I think Pato was probably, best pace all day. And then in third, I had Ray Hall, led the most laps of anyone on the day, had pace until the very end, like I said, until kind of that last stint, things really fell apart. And, like we've talked about, unfortunately, was kind of on the wrong strategy as well. So, I think it was a really good performance from Ray Hall, but I think some other things could have gone their way, and they probably would have finished higher up had they elected for a different strategy and maybe been able to hold on to the pace there at the end.
Yeah, I've gone with a pretty similar podium here. nobody else other than Alex Palou in first. I mean, it's not even really an argument for that. I've gone with Rahal second just because this is such a good performance for them. I believe it's their best single race performance since 2023, or at least for Graham specifically. So, a big moment for them, even if they end up kind of losing some to the pack in the end. It's still a fantastic run for them. Led a lot of laps and certainly got a lot of TV time. That's for sure. And then I've got Pato Award third, so same three as you. I did think about a couple other guys here. A guy like Rinus VK, who had a really rough qualifying, stormed all the way back into a top 10, and it's really just another race and what's been a great season for him so far. But Pato's a guy that was also due for a good race, and to come out and finish second right here, right before the 500, I think builds some positive momentum for him. Even with the differences between the road course and the oval, I still think that I think even though he's, I believe, fourth in points, it hasn't felt like his best season so far yet. So to come out and put together a really solid second place finish and move up some spots throughout that race, I think that he's going to be, feeling really confident going into Indy that this could be his year.
Yeah, I like that, and I had some honorable mentions as well. Like you mentioned, VK 24th to 9th. I thought that was a really good performance coming off his fourth place finish the week prior. And then I also had Scott Dixon 16th to 5th. I was thinking earlier this week, it's like we just haven't really seen anything out of Scott Dixon this year. It's been kind of, he was on the podium in the first race of the year, and then after that, it's kind of been crickets from him while Palou's been, collecting all these trophies. But I thought it was a good race from him. Will Power finished third, his best finish of the year. And then Kyle Kirkwood as well, 21st to 8th. We had a lot of guys who started back kind of mid-pack and in the 20s and then managed to work their way up in the top 10. So I think you got to shout some of those guys out as well for the good day those boys had. My stinker of the week was Andretti, just in general. Marcus Ericsson out early with a mechanical issue after qualifying 20th. Still not a great qualifying result, obviously. And then Herta, his unlucky season kind of continues as well with more mechanical issues of his own. He was kind of put a lap down early, managed to get that lap back, but then those mechanical issues were just too much and had to retire from the race a little bit early. That being said, like I mentioned, Kirkwood moving from 21st to 8th, really solid performance from him. But, to have those other two guys out on mechanical issues, and then especially for Herta, it's just been kind of the year to forget for him so far. Kind of a similar year to what we've seen from Blaney and NASCAR, just putting in some good just having good pace, but just not having anything to show for it really. So yeah, I think Andretti has to be the stinker of the week here, at least for me.
Yeah, it's funny. I already had Andretti on my mind before I even looked at the sheet, so I'm just gonna stick with them as well. I think, really, I mean, Herta especially has felt like he's had a lot of pace, like you mentioned, and has been kind of let down by the team so far a few times this year. Indy, and then of course St. Pete as well, and a couple others. I mean, it feels like almost every week in the same way, like you mentioned it. A few of these guys in NASCAR, Blaney, Busch, Keselowski, all have so much bad luck. Hurt has been in kind of the same boat with those guys. So, and then Ericsson's a strange one because he's had some issues as well, but he's also just struggled with pace and has not really been up to par this year. I thought he was going to be a guy preseason that could have a big comeback year, and it's been quite the opposite for him. So I still feel pretty good about my Andretti prediction for a big year, though, because Kirkwood has been really solid, and like you mentioned, he did have a nice day, so a credit to him. But overall, it just feels like a day where Andretti could have done more, but they really didn't have great qualifying either, and then they come out in the race and have some struggles there for Herta and for Ericsson. So yeah, I'm gonna say for the whole weekend, I'm gonna go with Andretti despite Kirkwood's best efforts.
Yeah, like you mentioned with Ericsson, Herta has pretty much had the pace everywhere, just bad luck. Kirkwood has the win, and he's had pace pretty much everywhere as well. the Ericsson one is the one that really is kind of it's kind of an issue. It's becoming an issue here. Uh, Ever since moving to Andretti, I just feel like the pace has been really nowhere compared to his teammates and compared to the rest of the grid. At Chip Ganassi, he won the 500, but he also had some really good finishes elsewhere, and just seemed to have better pace than what he's had at Andretti. I'm not sure exactly what the situation was at Ganassi that made him leave, but I kind of thought that it was a weird move at the time, just because Andretti is kind of the second Honda team to Chip Ganassi right now. Ever since he's gone to Andretti, that's kind of been the case, that he's just been slower generally than what he has been. I think he had a good finish or two earlier this year, and I thought maybe things were turning around, but these last few races, he's had some issues, but he's also just kind of been slow, and that's really alarming for Ericsson, and a thing that I think we need to keep a watch on. If that continues, through the rest of this year, that's kind of 2 years with Andretti that have been not very good for him. So that's something for sure to keep an eye on as we kind of look down the rest of the standings, in IndyCar for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been a very odd year for for Ericsson, especially given the teammates' pace. I certainly he's got to be on the hot seat as much as just about any driver in IndyCar right now. Unfortunately, because he has had some success, obviously winning the Indy 500 and having a couple other nice moments in IndyCar. But yeah, this last year or two, it's been pretty much all downhill from him, and there'll be plenty of young drivers contending to take that seat if Ericsson doesn't step it up soon in his next few races.
Yeah, I agree. He's got to turn something around here pretty soon. I think at least. Let's move to NASCAR now, where Kyle Larson wins from pole position. In dominant fashion, he managed to sweep the stages: stage one, stage two, and the race. Him and that 5 team moved to the top of the standings now in both the playoffs and just the general regular season drivers standings. And really this could be 3 wins in a row, and not if you don't include Talladega, the super speedway race, although he was close there too for the win. If he hadn't lost out last week, he did lead a ton of laps at Texas, and I thought he had a great chance to win there, before kind of just, falling back a little bit and finishing still, a solid finish there. But, this has been a great stretch for Larson with the win at Bristol, close calls at Talladega and Texas, and now, another win here at Kansas, and a really dominant win. It just feels like everywhere we're showing up to right now, he's leading a ton of laps, and he's either winning the race or coming pretty darn close in the end.
Yeah, he's been phenomenal. I mean, he's up to first now in the standings, and he really deserves it at this point, just given his consistency. 3 wins now, I believe, for Larson, and he has the most stage wins of anyone this year. So I think they said on the broadcast he has double the stage wins of anybody else so far this year, which is, I know that that can get a little dicey. Sometimes guys go for a stage win at the cost of their race or whatever, but still incredibly impressive either way. And yeah, just this is just one of those kinds of tracks. I know you can run all kinds of different lanes at Kansas, but you can certainly wall ride it, and nobody's better at that than Kyle Larson. So yeah, I mean he was a pretty solid pre-race favorite, and I understood why, because he's so good at these kinds of tracks.
Yeah, I kind of thought, I kind of didn't really remember how much guys kind of ride up near the wall here at Kansas, just because you think of Darlington and Homestead is really the 2 where guys are, right up against the wall. But Larson was, managing to do that pretty well for a majority of the day. He was riding up near the wall here at Kansas. I feel like you have a better ability to run, a lower midline here at Kansas than you do at like a Darlington or at Homestead. But if you get him up near that wall, he's just kind of unstoppable if he can make that groove work for whatever reason. I don't know if it's his dirt background or what's the case, but he's able to get up near that wall and make it work, like we've said, better than pretty much anyone out there. And he's really on fire right now. The month of May, being what it is for Larson, he's got the double coming up. He's gonna do Indy and the Coke 600 in the same day. Hopefully, weather providing and everything else. I feel like it's gonna kind of either continue to be an awesome month for Larson here, or it may be one that ends kind of in underwhelming fashion, depending on how Indy and the Coke 600 go. I feel like he is, I think he's obviously taking a lot of confidence into what he's got going on right now in the month of May. And I think that could be a huge thing for him. We obviously saw him qualify really well at Indy last year. He ran pretty well in the race before he had that speeding penalty. And with the, that momentum he has right now, I think it could be a huge month of May for Kyle Larson. And then, we go to another mile and a half, the next points race for NASCAR in Charlotte. I don't see why Larson can't do well or win there either. It's like, things right now seem to be in a very good, good direction for him, where I think Larson could have, a very good month of May, if not winning, one of those two double races, at least having really good performances at both of those for sure.
Yeah, it would be wild if you won them both on the same day. I just checked the odds the other day. I don't know what the Coke 600 odds are, but for Indy, he is right behind Award and Newgarden as the favorites for that race. And I mean,
That's insane.
yeah, I know. He has shown a really good pace there. Like you mentioned, a penalty last year kind of cost him a little bit, but I want to see him up there, in the lead pack going at it. Even if he doesn't win it, like see him up there battling in the top five, top 10. I think would be really awesome to see him up there with the best of IndyCar. So I think he's certainly capable of it. I mean, we're not doing picks yet, I guess, for Indy. But I think that he's, given his lack of experience with the car, I think he's as good of a bet as you can be to be up there fighting for a win. And uh, yeah, so to get a win here in the last points race before Indy is certainly massive bit of momentum for him, even being such a different track and obviously NASCAR instead of IndyCar. Still nice, and then he gets to go into the All Star weekend next weekend, and then right into Indy from there. So it's certainly a great time to be Kyle Larson, and yeah, I think he's going to be, like you mentioned, could have a massive month here.
Yeah, like you said, we're not making our picks yet for Indy. There's a lot of practice and qualifying to go, but I think he, I don't want to. It's so tough to say because he is not a full time IndyCar driver. This is only going to be a second race on an oval in IndyCar, really in any form in IndyCar, but on an oval and at the Indy 500 where so many different things can happen. But I really think he might have a chance to win it. I don't want to go too far out on a limb here because I have a ton of respect for the full time IndyCar guys, and it feels a little disrespectful to say a guy who's only done one race is going to come in and win it for sure. But I think he actually has a really solid chance to do it, which is truly wild to say, and I think it speaks to the testament of the level of driver that he is for sure. That so many people believe that he has a great chance, and like you said, the odds right now kind of speak to him being up there with two of if not the best two oval guys in IndyCar, and definitely at the Indy 500 the last few years, a Newgarden and an Award. So I think there's a lot of belief right now behind the Larson Indy 500 movement. I wouldn't say he's a full-fledged favorite by any means, and those odds are probably, in all honesty, a bit too high, but I really think that he does actually have a chance to not just do well here, but actually win the thing.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. Is that I think that Newgarden and O'Ward should definitely be favored ahead of him, just given their experience in this race and their success. Even O'Ward not having won it, still being so close so many times already at a young age, and Newgarden back-to-back wins. So yeah, I would definitely put them both ahead of Larson. I do think I don't know if I'd have him third if I was making the odds, but I think it is fair to say that after those two, it's kind of wide open. That there's a lot of guys that could come out, out of the woodwork here and win this race. A lot of guys who, even if they are full time IndyCar drivers, haven't had massive success in the series this year, and maybe even some guys who aren't full time drivers anymore will come out and put in some solid performances. We saw Helio win this race a few years ago, at a pretty old age, and it really is kind of all over the board after those two right now. So, not to derail it too far from our NASCAR conversation in IndyCar, but yeah, I think that he's got a great shot. After those two that I mentioned, he's up there with pretty much anybody, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with that. Getting back to NASCAR, like you said, not to stray too far away, it was a tough day for some of the veterans in Kansas that were looking for a win or a solid finish. Guys like Brad Keselowski crash out from second place with 73 to go, kind of started, a train of cautions there and kind of another, not as big as Texas last week, but another caution-filled second half of the race. His fourth DNF through 11 races in 2024, and Kyle Busch as well crashes on a lap 60 restart. Just kind of one of those four wide racing things coming out of a corner where Chastain is up near the wall. He's got to stay out of the wall. Gets a little into the side of Barry, who gets into the side of Gragson, who gets into the side of Busch, and then Busch spins out from there. So yeah, it was definitely a tough scene for both of those guys. And I kind of want to gauge this for you. If you think last week for Kyle Busch was more heartbreaking, spinning out from from a very solid position by himself in Texas, or if Keselowski here crashing out from second what was more kind of heartbreaking from one of those two veterans who were in desperate need of a really good finish or a win.
Yeah, for me, I'm gonna go with Brad here because it did look like he had a lot of pace, and frankly, it doesn't really we don't really put teams on our podium usually, so I wasn't gonna mention them, but RFK really did have some great pace this week, and it's a team that we've been talking all year about their struggles, especially Brad, but um, they clearly had the pace this week. Brad, was running great, and Busher and Priest both have really nice days as well. So, yeah, I would say Brad. Obviously, they're both so tough to see. I mean, Kyle, it's just happened so many times by now. Uh, Whereas Brad is really, last couple of years have been a little bit tough, but Brad has really been more this year. Whereas Kyle, deep into last year, we've seen this so many times now. So, it's been really just a brutal year for both of them. They both had, Kyle more than Brad, I would say, has had the chances, but um, they've both had moments, and it's kind of crash and burned every time. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Brad though on this one because that RFK really had the pace this week, and they kind of Priest especially had a nice finish in the end, but they failed to convert that pace into a win or even a top three or something like that.
Yeah, I got to go Brad as well. Just because, yeah, Bush has had not a great year for his standards at least, but he still has a way to point his way into to the playoffs if things go that way. Where Brad K, he's so far back, and things have gone so bad for him this year that he really needed a win to get his way in, and I think he might have. Larson was going to be hard to beat, but I think he might have had the pace to do it. He started back in 36th. Through pace and through strategy, he worked his way up, all the way up to second, like we said, with just 70 laps to go, and then crashes out from there, and that's just really heartbreaking for a guy like Brad, who, like we said, nothing's gone his way this year. It's been, a horrible year, probably the worst year of his Cup Series career up to this point. I know he's getting older. He's going to run out of opportunities here soon. And that just sucks because I think he had great pace today. Hopefully, this is something that can continue and maybe they can snag a win somewhere that would help them get into the playoffs. But at this point, I think pointing their way in is out of the picture. They're going to have to win one and this was a great opportunity to do that. So for that reason alone, I think Brad K has to be the more heartbreaking of the two. But that Busch one was still tough as well. And I also think Brad K probably had a better chance to actually win this race than Busch did in Texas. So yeah, I got to go Brad K here as well.
Yeah, you make a great point there about Brad's point situation compared to Kyle's. I think that Kyle has had a lot of nice runs this year, and clearly still has a lot of pace. It's just been wrong place, wrong time, or bad luck, or maybe push the car a little too hard here and there. But yeah, I don't feel as concerned about Kyle right now as I do Brad, just because they've been struggling so much this year, uh, especially Brad's side of the garage compared to the rest of the team. I do think they've shown glimpses, like I mentioned this week, and Priest has had put together a pretty nice season. Buscher's had a
For
moment
sure.
here and there, so I don't think that the pace is totally gone there. It's just certainly it really felt like this was the moment. Even if he didn't win, just a top 2, 3 finish would have been really nice for the momentum. It would have really kind of shown like hey, we're here, we can do this. And instead, you just yeah, just another disappointment for Brad K.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. You hate to see that for him, and hopefully they can still, despite crashing, at least take the momentum forward and maybe get a win here somewhere and point their way. And I think a lot of people would like to see that for Brad K as he kind of gets older here. Now let's move to our personal top three for NASCAR at Kansas. I have Kyle Larson number one. Similar to the Palou situation, not really anything else to say there. Dominant performance. And second, I had Josh Berry. Started in the back, worked his way up into the top five, got a penalty, and then worked his way back up again to finish sixth. I thought it was, a really solid performance. The 21 team in that car seems so fast right now, especially on the intermediates, but really everywhere. I actually think, in a way, for a little bit, I was looking at it as possibly stinker of the week for Barry because he had so much pace and that penalty forced them all the way back. So in a way, it was kind of a missed opportunity for a better finish for Barry, but at the same time, still coming back from the penalty to finish back in sixth, I think was a really good showing from him at least, and I thought that was worth noting. And then in third, I have Corey Heim. Started 28th and finished 13th in just his fourth career Cup Series start, and did better than his teammate for the week, rookie 2311 driver Riley Herbst, who finished back in 27th, and really hasn't shown too much this year. For Heim to come in and do that in just his fourth Cup start in a car that doesn't run every week, and a team that doesn't run every week with a fourth 2311 team, I just think that it was a really good performance from him and showed a lot of promise for hopefully the future of him going Cup Series full time.
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, I had pretty similar thoughts when it came to this podium. I mean, obviously, your first one is going to be Kyle Larson again, very much like Palou earlier, just such a dominant performance. Led, about as much of a race as you can. 221 laps here, just a phenomenal top to bottom performance for him. I also had Barry and Heim on my podium. So I'll end up shouting out a couple other guys here. But real quick, yeah, Barry's just so exciting just to see the pace from Wood Brothers. And not for the first time this year, obviously with the win in Vegas, and they really seem to have something dialed in for these like a mile and a half kind of tracks. They're really, really kind of cooking this year. So I'm excited to see. I would love to see them make a little bit of a playoff run. I'm certainly not anticipating a championship or anything, but even just making it past the first round, I think would be really awesome for that Wood Brothers team, and that's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. I think at the moment, I believe he's 17th on points right now, so he's a borderline qualifier on points even without the win. Not one of those fluke win situations, in my opinion. Just been an impressive season so far for Barry. And then you mentioned Heim. just coming in and putting in gaining 15 spots in a cup race like that so early on in his career is really phenomenal. Like you mentioned, especially when you have another young teammate like that to come in and in essentially the same equipment and outperform him by that much. I think really just shows Heim's potential, and certainly, obviously, I'd seen him in Xfinity, and I certainly know the name, but he's a lot more on my radar. I think as a future NASCAR talent after this in the Cup Series. And just to shout out a couple other guys, like I mentioned, Priest had a fantastic day, coming all the
Hmm.
way up from 30th, finishing seventh. You know, uh, Again, shout out to RFK for that pace. And then a nice little top 10 here for John Hunter Nemechek coming up from
Yep.
17th, and not the biggest, a push to the front out of, any of our podium guys, but still, always, impressive seeing him up there in the top 10 and a nice little performance there for Legacy Motor Club. It wasn't really Eric Jones's day, but John Hunter kind of carried the torch for the day for them.
Yeah, I like that as well. Certainly, John Hunter Nemechek had a great day, and Priest did as well. My last, my honorable mention here, SVG Oval Top 20, baby. Let's go, SVG. He's doing it. He's coming, man. I know it. He's gonna get there eventually. I just know it. In all seriousness, though, I think it actually, yes, there were a lot of cautions, but he does come back from 2 laps down, manages to finish on the lead lap, top 20. Um, the pace is still somewhat lacking to the rest of the guys on these ovals, but I will say, the last three, kind of more traditional-ish ovals that we've had, Darlington, he finished his 20th. In Texas last week, 22nd, and here 20th. So, not stellar finishes, but he is getting, closer and closer. And I think that the pace is getting there. It's going to take some time. He's not an oval guy by any means, but if he can get to just finishing, top 20 on a regular basis at these ovals, and then do what he does on the road courses and street courses, I think with that potential that we had for SVG is certainly still there. So the SVG Oval Top 20, we're still looking at it, and we're still keeping SVG in mind for sure.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to see him pick up the pace a little bit here. He did gain 14 spots on the day. I know that, like you mentioned, a lot of that comes from, some from wrecks and car issues and whatnot, but that doesn't matter at the end of the day. To me, it's still a really impressive run to keep the pace, like you mentioned, coming back on a day where he looked like he was kind of down and out. Um, at the end of the day, usually not a party in the streets for 20th, but I'm pretty happy with this SVG performance, and I'm looking forward to seeing kind of what he looks like on the ovals by the end of this year. I think that even if he could be a mediocre oval guy by the end of the year, like you said, I think that he that could go a long way for these next couple of years of him, hopefully in NASCAR.
The SVG Oval Top 20 watch will continue to be on my radar at every oval race. I will be looking down the leaderboard for the SVG Top 20 on the ovals. I will not stop looking for that. And I will not stop celebrating it either when it happens, for sure.
Yeah, the SVG Top 20 watch will return in Avengers Secret Wars.
For sure. Uh, Moving to stinker of the week, I have Chase Elliott. Not necessarily him actually, really just his pit crew for the bad stop. They squandered a great opportunity for a win with that bad stop. They were out front leading the race. He actually got around Larson on one of those restarts. It looked like they could steal one from their teammate from Larson on such a dominant day, and then he just gets stuck back in traffic, and that's kind of it for him. So stinker of the week, Chase Elliott. Yeah, not actually Chase Elliott though. Kind of Chase Elliott's pit crew, but I'll say Chase Elliott in that number 9 team, I guess.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. We kind of alluded to this already, with the Corey Hine conversation, but and this isn't as much one day specific as it is kind of the whole year. Because it was kind of tough. A lot of the guys today, sort of just had a tire go down or had got caught up in a wreck that wasn't their fault. There wasn't a lot of obvious stinkers in my opinion today. So I'm going to go with Riley Herbst just to kind of start the conversation. This has been a pretty rough year for Riley so far, and I know that he's got a couple pretty accomplished teammates, there at 2311, but he's been well off the pace so far, and I'm hoping that he finds it, hoping that he gets it together because still pretty young in his career. Yeah, hopefully they give him a little bit of time, but it's not been the start that he's been looking for, that the team's been looking for.
Come on, Riley Herbst. Can't be losing to Corey Heim, fourth Cup Series start. We just can't have that. We got to be doing better than that. I'm sorry, Riley, but you got to be doing better here.
By 14 spots, yeah.
Yeah, that's not good as well. 14 spots. And lastly here, we'll move on to some news from F1 this week. Franco Colapinto replaces Jack Doohan starting this week in Imola. There was, it seemed like this was going to happen. This was going to be the outcome for Doohan. I don't know if it was going to be the outcome no matter what his results were, but his results, I guess I would say, certainly didn't help that cause. It was rumored that this was going to be the case for a while, and in the end it happened, and Colapinto was going to start, they say, on a similar, 5-race kind of deal that Doohan had. What are your thoughts here? Because I think it was still a little bit early to be replacing Doohan, but at the same time, if this was a plan all along and Doohan knew it and he just wasn't getting it done, then it sucks. But I'm not sure exactly what else to say for Doohan.
Yeah, it's disappointing. I mean, I talked about this and wrote about this on our website, before the season, that I was hoping that Doohan would get a fair shake. Not even, I'm not really for or against Doohan, as a driver or anything. It's not a fan situation. It's just, wanting to see the guy get a fair shake because, he's probably a guy that is only going to get one shot in F1 unless some real shakeups happen or some major sponsorship money comes in. So yeah, it's disappointing. I mean, I would have loved to have seen the guy get some more run and at least make it to summer break. I think it's tough to say you're owed anything in F1, but it would have been nice to see them give him till summer break. I will say, not to really defend Alpine, but uh, Doohan certainly was off the pace. I mean, he had his moments. He had a couple of nice moments here and there. Where he looked kind of close to Gasly, and Gasly's been kind of up and down this season. Maybe some of that's the car, but he's 1 week qualifying like fifth or sixth, and the next week like 17th.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of been a wild season. It seems like at Alpine behind closed doors. Obviously, they just had a team
That's true too.
principal, Oliver Oaks leave. They said that was personal reasons, but then now Flavio's in, and Colapinto got in immediately after that, and it just kind of seems like a mess at Alpine right now. So in a way, I'm glad that Jack is somewhat out of that, or at least on the outskirts, being the reserve driver. But I am excited to see Franco back. I loved watching him, and I think he's an exciting driver. He's kind of a all or nothing guy, a guy that really goes for it. Is willing to put the car at risk, as we saw a couple times towards the end of last year. So I am excited to see Franco back, but I didn't really want to see a Doohan leave so soon. Would have liked to see him stay till summer break at least.
Yeah, I think if you're going to make that commitment to Doohan, at least make that commitment to be with him for a little bit of time and give him a decent shot, like you said, at least till summer break. To through 6 races or whatever we're through now, it's too quick to fully judge someone in their F1 career based solely on that. There's a lot of different things that can happen through 6 races, and I think he needed more time. He didn't help his cause, obviously. The pace, wasn't there a ton, but also, like I said, he only had 6 races. There's a certain, length of time it takes to get comfortable with a car, especially a car that seems to be so odd, like Alpine has, where 1 week it's really good and 1 week it's not. So, I wish he would have got more time, but like you said, I am excited to see what Colapinto can do based on what we saw last year in the Williams for a few races. I think that there's a lot to look forward to. And the real thing comes when the 5 races are up and we decide if Colapinto stays or if they go back to Duon or if they go to a different driver or whatnot. What happens from there? That's really kind of the big thing, and I think that just depends on how Colapinto is able to do through these first 5 races or so.
Yeah, I thought that was the fascinating part of this is the 5 race thing. I don't know if that was a pre-decided contract before the year or what happened there, but that's kind of a bizarre to me why they would make that decision and not give Colapinto the rest of the season, especially given that we have seen him in F1 before. He's technically a rookie, I guess, and that he hasn't done a full time season, but he's not new, so you kind of know at least a little bit what you're getting. Um, yeah, that kind of threw me off a little bit. I don't know where they would go if they. I know they have a Paul Aaron, I believe, as a reserve. If they go that direction, maybe they call Mick over from the WEC team and throw him in the seat for a few
Yeah,
races, or maybe it's just
yeah,
like
it's
a
possible.
it's just like a roulette. They just spin the wheel and pick a new driver out for every week. That'd be fun. But um, yeah, I guess that makes an interesting storyline for the next couple months. If Franco can keep his seat now, or if they're gonna spin the wheel again and look for someone else.
You think Latifi wants back in,
Yeah, we might have to get
or do you think he's too far gone?
him and Sargent should race for it. Put him
We'll have
at
a
time
karting
trials.
race to see who gets the seat.
Yeah, we could do karting race, or we could do a time trials. Either one. Put them both out there.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Add Mazepin in there too. He would make for a fun addition to that karting race for sure. With a
Yeah, I
seat on the
think
line.
I think we get a full 20 in there. Maybe we could do those three, and then we could bring back Vettel just to switch it up a little bit.
Vettel have to start like 10 seconds behind, I think, to make it fair.
Yeah, I mean maybe a lap behind.
Yeah, that's true too. I think that's well, yeah. I think it'll definitely be interesting to see what Alpine does from here. Certainly, uh, my guess would be Colapinto does well enough to keep that going forwards, but you never know, especially with like you said how things are at Alpine right now. It seems very up in the air for sure with everything going forward.
Yeah, I would guess they keep Franco unless it's a total disaster. But who knows at this point, honestly.
I think we should have that karting race regardless. I think that would make for great TV.
Yeah, well, I've always thought they should do that. I've seen other people suggest this too, but that they should have karting races with the actual active drivers. Even once a
I
year. That
agree.
would
I
be
agree with
that
that.
would be that'd be a blast. But yeah, I've seen a couple of them do it on YouTube, but not the full grid. So maybe one day they should do a double points race for karting.
All-star race, $1 million challenge, I think would be $1 million karting race. I think that would do numbers for sure.
Yeah, that'd be perfect for Monaco.
Just replace the cars with carts and run it back.
Yeah, we could do alternate Monaco and like Talladega.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think that's what they're gonna go for sure. Do karting at Talladega and Monaco and decide who gets $1 million out of that. I think that's a great call.
Let's do it.
Well, I think that's everything for this week. We'll be back next week with a ton to break down. IndyCar, Indy 500 qualifying, F1 in Imola, and the NASCAR All-Star Race, which is probably the least exciting of those three, to be honest. But that's okay. We'll cover it a little bit anyways. And yeah, I think we'll have a ton to discuss next weekend. A lot going on right now in the month of May for motorsports, and a great time to be a motorsports fan with, kind of the Triple Crown coming up here in a couple weeks. I know a lot of people are going to get upset that I'm saying the Triple Crown and we're not talking about Le Mans and we're talking about the Coke 600, but I think it's the Triple Crown for the day, certainly with those three big races. So, yeah, we'll be back to discuss all of that next week.
Yeah, everybody go fan vote SVG into the race. I don't even know if the vote's still open, but if it is, get our boy some more oval
Yes,
experience.
please. For sure, he needs it. He needs it going forwards. The SVG fan club will unite, and we will be on top 20 watch for the All-Star race, for
Yep,
sure.
we'll get him there.
All right, well, we'll see you guys next week. Thank you guys for listening, and talk to you next time.
Yep. See you soon.